Hello, I'm Kristen Olson and welcome to my studio. Today I'd like to show you how to paint an Impressionist style watercolor painting of Monet's Iris Garden and his home at Giverny, France. I'll be painting with my favorite new little travel brush. It's a Belle Aqua silver brush, 1/4 inch dagger brush, and I'll be using Rembrandt watercolor paints. If you haven't already done so, take a minute to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave me a comment at the end. I'd love to hear from you and hear what you think. And even if you have any special requests or things that you'd like to learn to paint, please leave it in the comments. And if you'd like more in-depth lessons, you can join me on patreon.com/Kristen Olson Stone. All right, let's get started. I'm going to be painting on Rembrandt watercolor paper. This is all cotton watercolor paper, and this is a 7-inch by 10-inch watercolor block, or 17.8 by 25.4 centimeters, and it is 140-pound cold press. It's a beautiful paper. I'm going to start with the foreground. I typically paint from front to back or foreground to background when I paint with watercolor. And so I'm going to start with cobalt blue, and I'm going to let my colors mix on the paper. So I'm going to be mixing in other colors with them. So if I put down some cobalt blue, then I'll mix some pink in with it, or maybe just a little bit of water if I want it to be lighter on one side. I'm painting today with a Belle Aqua dagger travel brush. And it's a wonderful, wonderful brush. I love it. So this is the quinacridone rose, and I'm mixing that with cobalt blue. So some of the irises are white, some of them are pink, some of them are the traditional blue color. I'm leaving little bits of white in between my brush strokes. So I'm going to just put a few of the violet ones in first, and then I'm going to paint some of the white ones. And in between all of these irises are beautiful orange flowers and other colors of flowers. So I don't want everyone to look the same, and that's why some of these are more pink and some of them are more purple or violet, but still using the same couple of colors. So I'm going to put in a couple more now that are more of a brighter pink. So I've mixed a little bit of my cadmium red along with the quinacridone rose. And some of them are this beautiful deep magenta. I really like these dark ones. So I'm using Madder Lake and mauve to make this really rich dark color. And putting them just kind of in random places. So I want to make sure my flowers don't look like they're all perfectly lined up. I want some of them to be higher, placed higher in the composition, and some of them to be lower. And I'm trying to make my brush strokes go out and in and out again to catch the shape of the pretty iris petals. Now I'm going to switch to a much lighter blue-violet. So this is a lot of water and just a tiny bit of paint. So I just rinsed my brush again because that was a little darker than I wanted it to be. So I still want this to be pretty light. And I'll put a couple over here. So now I want to start putting in some of the yellow and orange flowers. So I'm going to use cadmium orange, but it's a little too bright. So I'm going to mix some gamboge with it. And that'll give me a better orange color. And I'm going to put some of those brush strokes on this side. The stagger brush is really fun to paint with. I can get small little pointed strokes and then broader strokes at the same time. So these orange flowers, I want to create what is called a gradient, where it goes from a deeper orange and then over here on this side it becomes more of an orangish yellow and then an even lighter yellow. So I'm going to have the color just kind of slowly shift across my painting. So this is the more yellowish orange. So when you're painting, the more water you use, the more your paint looks, or your paint sinks into the paper and dries lighter. And the less water you use, the more it dries and looks like it does while you're working on the painting. So now I've picked up cadmium lemon and I'm continuing that shift of color going across the canvas. So you can see over here, it's a deeper orange, and now it's more of a yellow, and now it's an even lighter yellow. And now I'm going to have it shift back to the deeper yellow here, and as I move into this section of the painting, it's going to go back to being orange. So for variety, I'm going to use some Azo Yellow Deep for my deeper yellow. And I'm being careful not to touch the violet part of my flowers. I just want to kind of go around them and leave a little white space in between. Now I'm going to pick up the darker orange and just bring them across. Just like that. So I could see this orange was drying a little lighter than what I intended, so that's why I went back and added some more paint. Now I'm going to rinse my brush again, and I'm going to shift to green so I can paint some of these green leaves. And I'm going to start with sap green, and I'm going to use all my greens. So I'll start with sap green, and I'm going to put some random strokes here for the leaves, like that. And now I'm going to make my sap green more of a bluish green. So I've added cerulean blue to it. So when I'm painting greens, I like to have bluish greens and yellow greens, so I alternate a lot. So as soon as I finish one green, if it's a yellowish green, then I pick up some bluish green and vice versa. So now I'm going to make this one a lighter yellow. So I'm mixing some gamboge with my green and making some lighter, more yellowy green strokes like this. So now I'm going to jump over to Monet's house. I want the roof to be a violet gray, so I'm going to use the same color, same two colors I was using to paint the irises, and to those two colors I'm going to add yellow ochre. I'm going to pick up a little more blue, so it's a combination of yellow ochre and quinacridone rose and cobalt blue. And I'm going to just paint the roof. It's nice gray color. That's a beautiful color gray. So colors get grayer as they go back in space. So this is, the house is in the middle ground and the flowers are in the foreground. So I want the colors of the house to be grayed down versions of any of the colors that I used in the foreground. So to gray any color, you add its complement, and depending on how much of the complement you add, that'll determine how gray the color is. So there are gray grays and then there are colorful grays. So the chimney is also gray, so I'm going to use burnt sienna and mix it with that same color that I already had. And I'll use that for the left side of the chimney. And then for the right side where it has more sun on it, I'm mixing some yellow ochre in with the same gray color. So it's lighter, it's yellower, a little more sunny, and that's the color I've got on the right side of the chimney. So the front of the house has these pretty green shutters, and it also has pink. And then everything seems to be outlined in an off-white color. So I'm going to use phthalo green for the green in the shutters. And in my drawing, you can see which shutters, or which of the rectangles are shutters, because I drew little lines on them. And that was to give it texture, but also to help me remember which one of the rectangles were shutters and which ones were sections of the pink part of the house. I'm gonna add a little more color to this one. Oop, not quite that much. That one got a little bit dark. But actually I want to have a little bit of shading on the upper corners of a couple of these shutters. So I'm just adding a little extra deep blue-green, phthalo green. If you don't have phthalo green, you could use permanent green or some other greens. As long as it's a nice bluish green, that should work for you. I'm also going to put in the sky. I'm just going to use cobalt blue by itself and a lot of water, and just put in some nice broad loose strokes for the sky. Like that. And come down towards the house. But when I get close to the roof, I'm going to rinse my brush and just use water. And I'm still leaving little bits of white. I want most of the deeper blue to be at the top of the canvas. There we are. So now for the trees that frame the house. So I purposefully made this tree not as tall as the one on the left. So the one on the left goes completely off the top of the page, and the one on the right is lower. In the reference photo, both of the trees are the same height, but I thought my painting would be more interesting if one was taller and one was shorter. So I'll start with the one on the right. And I'm using Hooker's Green Deep. And to the Hooker's Green, I'm going to add some yellow. And if you've watched some of my videos before, you'll know that I like to drop in a little bit of sunshine when I'm painting trees. So I'm going to use some gamboge and put that right into the top of the tree. Let the colors mix around on the paper and make it look like it has nice sunny parts and then deep shadowy greens. And that's what I call dropping in the sunshine. Now I'm going to make this tree a nice yellow tree underneath the green tree. But I don't want it to come down too far and be too close to the yellow in my orange flowers, because I don't want it to be confusing. I want the yellow tree to look like a yellow tree and the flowers to look like flowers. So I'm going to put a little more green under this yellow part of the tree. There's a bush or something back there that's that color, but that works very nicely, and so those two are separated. And now we'll paint the tree on the left. I'm going to use sap green, and I've divided this tree into a couple of different shapes. So everything kind of spills together in this garden. It's really lush and gorgeous, but to make my painting work, I need to have separation. So I need to have interesting and interlocking shapes. So I'm leaving lots of white here because I'm going to come back with some yellow and drop a little sunshine into this tree also. And I've got this nice big green shape here at the top, and then I'm going to bring it down and around, and then within this section I'm going to have another shape. So first I'll put some yellow in at the top. So this is cadmium yellow, and this tree goes right off the top of the page, and then underneath of it I want it to be a more neutral yellow color. So I've used yellow ochre along with the sap green, but it's mostly yellow ochre, and I want this shape to kind of fit inside of the big dominant green shape, and then it's going to become kind of a reddish green. So I've mixed some cadmium red with the yellow ochre, and that shape is coming around here. And now we've got some nice interlocking shapes for this tree, and then underneath I want it to be really, really dark. So I'm using Payne's Gray and Mauve, and to that I'm going to add some yellow ochre and put that really deep dark color back here behind the flowers. And I think I'll bring a little bit of that up in here as well. Really darken that tree in the center, and that'll give me a nice tall vertical dark. Landscape paintings really read well when they have some nice vertical darks. So there's a couple of trees in front of the house, and I'm going to make those lighter and fresher looking. So I'm going to use permanent green, which is a green that looks kind of artificial. So whenever I use permanent green in landscape painting, I always add a little bit of yellow to it or blue, but I make it shift one way or another. But it's really a bright, very pretty green. And when you have a landscape and there are lots of greens, you need to have lots of variety of greens, because there's so many different colors of green in flower gardens. So now I'm going to go back to my cadmium yellow, and I'm going to put some of that here. And there's a nice clump of purple flowers, kind of pinkish purple. So I'm going to go grab my quinacridone rose and put just kind of a nice sweep of those right across here. Remember, you don't want to make this line too straight across. You want it to be at a nice angle. This painting so far has a very nice impressionist feel. And while I've got this color on my brush, I'm going to add it in a couple of other places in my painting. Kind of give my flowers a little extra pop of color here and there. And I'm going to put a smattering of them down in the front, right here in the center. And now we're going to go over to the house. So the house is pink, but it's kind of a salmon color. So I'm going to mix a little bit of cadmium red with the rose. And I'm going to paint that right here in this triangle, or in this rectangle. And across the front here. And here. This section, this little shape is actually a window, which is, you can't see inside of it, so it's dark. So I've just used the dark that I had mixed up earlier with mauve. Okay, so I rinsed my brush, and now I'm picking up more of this pink color. I'm just adding some of this nice salmon color here, just filling in all of these nice shapes. And now I want to create a nice shadow color for the top of the under part of the roof. So I'm going to put a mixture of ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and quinacridone rose. So I want it to be similar to the color of the roof, but I also want it to be a little bit warmer. So I'm going to add some more yellow ochre to it because it looks too similar to the color in the roof. There we go. That looks much better. So it's got to be kind of warm underneath, like it's reflecting the warmth from the garden. So now I'm going to use some of the same color with even more yellow ochre, and I'm going to put some shadowing in here where the little round window is at the top, and just a little extra dark there. And I'm going to put some more of the same shadow color on this middle section. So these are just, nice horizontal lines, and I'm just making them kind of loose. I don't want them to be too bold. So I've got quite a bit of white left, which I'm happy with because there's a lot of white flowers, but I definitely need to fill in some more green in the foreground. So I took a minute to clean my palette. Now I've got a fresh place to mix lots of beautiful greens. So I'm using a mixture of hooker's green and permanent green, and rinsing my brush really well before I go back into my yellows. If you want to keep your yellows clean, and you're mixing yellow into green, make sure that you rinse your brush off really well in between. Okay, so that is a little bit too yellow, so I'm going to add a little more permanent green. And now I'm going to start going in between some of my other green strokes here with lighter strokes of green. And going to continue back here with just some smaller ones in between some of the yellow flowers. I got this nice band of color. And at this point, I'm letting some of my strokes of green go over my other strokes of color. So I've got a little bit of green overlaying some of the flower colors, and that is okay. So as I said, I've got a lot of white here already, but I just wanted to fill this in a little bit more with color, and green is definitely needed here. Now I'm going to rinse my brush again, and I'm going to pick up some cadmium yellow, and I'm going to put in a few more strokes of this nice yellowy green. It's yellowy green because my brush wasn't quite rinsed enough, but that's okay. I'm just kind of filling this space in. I wanted to get some more color here. And now what I want to do is take a look at my painting for a minute and just decide what it needs. So it looks very unfinished, which it is. The first thing I need to do is make a shadow under the roof here, where the roof is casting a shadow onto the salmon color. So I'm going to mix up my favorite shadow color, which is cobalt blue, quinacridone rose, and yellow ochre. And I'm going to put that down here, just like that. Bring this nice shadow color right across. And the same thing for under this overhang. So having a shadow really emphasizes the sunlight even more. And then along my roof, at the bottom of the roof, there's a very dark edge. So I'm mixing ultramarine blue and mauve, trying to get enough of that color, and just going to pull that darker line across the roof. And so everything that I'm going to be doing now is going to be all about adding finishing touches to my painting. So I'm going to add texture and darks and lights and shadow colors. So I'm adding a little bit of light and shadow to emphasize that on my two chimneys. And think I'm gonna make this a bit darker as well. I want to be careful not to go too dark, but I definitely want it to be dark enough that it emphasizes the light and shadow. I'm going to darken this window as well. You see how it's really coming to life now? I'm also going to add some red flowers. So I'm going to use cadmium red. Just a few little red flowers here and there, but I'm going to add them next to pink ones. So I feel like my painting has a lot of color, but perhaps it's missing a little bit of red. So the thing about painting in an impressionist style in watercolor or oil is you want to do a lot of layering of paints. You don't want your painting to look, maybe the word is anemic. You want your painting to be full of color and sparkle and beauty and lots of tiny brush strokes. So that gives your painting the look of texture and also detail. And it shows that you put a lot of time and effort into the painting and you thought a lot about the color and the light and the shadow and the greenery and the shape of things. But more important than the shape of things is the layering of all these colors. And that's really what separates Impressionism, I think, as a style from realism or abstract painting, is the multiple layers. Remember, Monet would work on some of his canvases for a year, layering and layering and layering the paints. And you can imitate a lot of those oil painting techniques and that dedication to texture when you're painting with watercolor or gouache. So now I'm going to add some more blue violet. So all of a sudden, I'm looking at my painting, I think, oh, there's too much pink and red, because of course that's what I've been adding. So now I'm going to emphasize the blue. And I want to make sure that my blue is bright and pungent. So I'm going to take the water off my brush by pressing the back part of the bristles into my paper towel instead of, I don't want to wipe my brush onto the paper towel to remove the water, because that will also remove the pigment. I just want to remove the water, so I'm painting with less water and more pigment. So that's a good little handy trick, tip, whatever, to remember when you're painting with watercolor. So you see how these little extra dark violet strokes, they're just little strokes of paint, but you see how it gives it more detail and texture. So you're sort of creating little visual cues without spelling out exactly what you're painting, but the viewer will still know. Now I'm also going to give a little detail to my shutters, the Monet shutters. So I'm just going to make little strokes like that over my pen marks, and then a line on the left and a line on the top and a line on the side. So I'm not covering up all of the paint that's already there. I'm just adding some dark accents. Like that. And now this one. There. And I want to add some texture to the roof to make it look like it has some shingles. So I'm going to use mauve and burnt sienna. And I'm just going to make a few marks like that. Notice how uneven they are. I think that's another element of the style of Impressionism, is the randomness of things, that things aren't perfectly lined up and not perfectly even. And yet you still are letting the viewer know that there are shingles on the roof, that there's textures. And there's also this little, I don't know what it's called, but this little thing that sticks up from the top of the roof. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of blue paint on that kind of a circle, a line, and a little circle on top of it. And the front of this part that sticks out, this little pretty triangle, is also in shadow. So I'm just adding a little bit of my 3-color shadow mixture that I like so much. So that's looking pretty good, but I feel like my trees still need a little bit of extra texture and detail. Then I think we'll be about finished. So I'm just going to add some strokes of Hooker's green. And even though this looks very dark, I'm still going to add some extra strokes of paint onto that as well. And a few strokes of the same green over here, just to give my tree a little more texture. And now I'm going to do one final thing. I'm going to mix cadmium red and quinacridone rose. I'm going to just make some pretty strokes of this dark pink and put a little more of it kind of moving down through the canvas. And now I'm going to mix some mauve with that. Really emphasize some of those dark, velvety irises. So values are usually a bit darker in the foreground, so this will bring the foreground forward. Really emphasize some of those dramatic looking irises. And I think also a little bit of sunshine needs to be put into this tree up here. So a few extra strokes of yellow. And I'm layering a couple of the strokes right over the shutters. And I'm even going to put a little bit of that yellow here. Just layering very loosely, having fun, playing with color, adding a little bit of extra sunshine to my painting. A little bit of extra orange. And still one more thing, I'm going to add some additional texture to this tree right here with this mauve color. I had layered it with a reddish green before, but I just think that would look really nice there. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning how to paint Monet's beautiful iris garden in an impressionist style.